folks, this is going to be a fantastic Everyday Empowerment Institute podcast today because I'm with a super yacht captain, Brendan O'Shaughnessy. He swims with me at the Pod Squad at Cottesloe, and talk about leadership and empowerment. I've got someone who does that on the high seas. Brendan, welcome aboard.
Thanks, Leigh. Look, thank you for inviting me. Privileged to join you in your room and looking forward to getting into our conversation.
Right, well, I've sent you some of the questions because when we talk about empowerment, it's such an important thing. And we talk about everyday empowerment, and you and I, as part of our own self-empowerment program, swim. But Lenny, let's go back. Brendan O'Shaughnessy, I've got your book now. Hold your book up because my mate Andy has borrowed my copy. There it is, Super Yacht Captain, a fantastic book that you gave me a signed copy just the other week. And it's a great read, folks. I highly recommend it. So let's talk about it. Let's go back in time, Super Yacht Captain. Tell us the Brendan O'Shaughnessy story.
Okay. It's a West Australian story. I grew up between Rockingham and Fremantle, sort of schooling in Fremantle, home in Rockingham, and I was a really good kid. There's not a great big story there. I grew up messing around in boats, just that beautiful hanging on the edge of Australia story that so many of us grew up with, messing around in boats, all of that. And I think this is a really important bit. My horizons were going to be fine. I worked hard at school. I largely listened to my authority figures, but then an influence, a very gentle influence, a friend's parent just said, there's a bigger world out there. Have a think about that. Where do you want to go? And it wasn't even a push. It was just an awakening. I never thought I had no interest in leaving Western Australia. But thanks, and now that I'm back here, I see that as valid. But from a career point of view, that was my first stage as social leadership.
Social leadership.
That parent just gave me a bit of empowerment. They also saw me. Leigh, we're at a certain age where children grew up seen but not heard. And this parent saw me.
And saw your potential. Saw your potential, you mean?
Just saw me in the room, full stop. Not potential, not anything. I just existed. Where with loving parents and loving society, kids were kind of on a sports field and then put away in a cupboard. You don't engage in a modern dialogue. But this one did. And wow, if I could give any message to anyone, is always speak to a child as a peer. So that was my childhood, really messing around in boats. Uncannily, I actually feel I left school in '87. America's Cup was Fremantle. What a place. Fremantle was just phenomenal. And I saw boats and I saw people in uniform, and I thought, this is great. I wonder what this is all about. At the same time, our economic cycle might have some parallels with today. Interest rates were a bit rampant. Times were tough. The job market was a bit rocky, and a military academy had just opened up. So again, with the support of that influence of parent and a couple of amazing teachers, some of whom I'm still in contact with, I applied, won scholarship, and attended the Defence Academy in Canberra. Humbling. I was a small town kid that did okay in sports and academics, and then I joined this group of high achievers and found that I was in the back seat of everything. And that was quite wonderful to go from being, I don't think I was ever a big fish in a small pond, but I was a fish. At least I was a fish.
Yeah.
And I then went to, arguably they said it was the top 5% of Australia. And I certainly felt that if there was the top 5, I was 4.999. And so that was wonderful. And I think that was also an amazing time where it didn't matter what social class, who you were. When your hair was taken back to a tennis ball and you're given ill-fitting green clothes and all thrown in together, it was your humanity that shone through. So I'll never forget that, and I really appreciated that. So that was my entry through childhood in a race through, Leigh.
Well, that's interesting because I often say to people, and I've said a number of times, how one conversation can change a life. And there's a great
Yeah.
example of one conversation changing a life. I use the example of a mate of mine, Jim Gerritsen, who went on to play water polo for Australia. David Neesham, one of the Neesham family in Fremantle, said to him, mate, you can play football and you might end up playing state football and you'll get one trip a year maybe, or you can play water polo and you can play for Australia and you can travel the world. You decide. And that one conversation, and Jim Jerrickson says that one conversation changed his life. And I've had a number of times. So that's a great example of one conversation. And again, not only that, but we also say in terms of the psychology of parent, adult, child, where you're saying talk to the child in an adult relationship as distinct from parent child. You know, I'm talking to you as another human being as distinct from I'm the adult, I know everything, you're a child, be seen, not heard. What a great example. Now, in the book, you talk about becoming a pilot, as in ship pilot, and going on Sydney Harbour, but you also talked a little bit about some of the work practices of those people in those days. And I remember you're saying something about how, so over the years, and because obviously you ended up, as you say, a super yacht captain, you're talking about people. On the one hand, we want to empower people and be autonomous, but clearly there are cultures and times when, and those are the days when union versus management and so on. Tell us a bit about that and your experience. What did you learn from those experiences in those pilot days?
Oh, so that was very early days. So first, okay, I'm going to go really quickly back and forward. I played junior football in the local Rockingham team.
Yep.
And I went to school up in town and I wore a tie to school, which isn't a big thing, but there was two different social groups working at once.
Yeah.
And I found as a young teen, the importance of moving between them and respecting both as equal. Yep. So that was this amazing, I didn't appreciate what I was getting there as a gift. Then I moved forward and I entered the Australian waterfront in the mid-90s. Remember those stories with the balaclavas and the Doberman? And the only real criteria was I was non-union aligned. I'd left the Navy, and so it wasn't piloting. I was driving a tug and barge. And the only criteria I had was I had some maritime experience and I wasn't a member of a union. I actually don't judge union membership. I think it's fantastic. Workers need to be supported. But there weren't any unions around because I was working cash at a bottle shop. There weren't many unions around for cash jobs at bottle shops.
Yeah.
I entered that workplace. And again, it's back to absolutely seeing people for equals. And I had this, I think the anecdote you're remembering was I came into Sydney Harbour and there was a tug master who'd retired. His qualifications had expired, but he was still kept on by P&O because just this knowledge was just there. And driving a tug on a harbour, I think listeners may have seen it in Fremantle. Everyone knows what a tug does. It's a really important job. It's a contact sport. You're driving a vessel into another vessel. So getting it wrong, the consequences are significant and immediately apparent. He was coaching me, and for a couple of weeks, I've been under constant assessment and training. We come into this little siding in Sydney Harbour, and he says, just pull in here, and I'm ready for my questions. So I'm thinking, oh, yeah. And he says, can you tell me about this? So we're just about to pull in, and I look down, and an engineer's standing with a line ready to drop on it, like you'd see on a ferry. I thought, okay, this isn't the first time this has happened. I didn't clock it. We tie up. Just leave it in gear, just leave it on, okay. He moves to a little tea room at the back of the bridge and he says, so tell me about this point. I said, well, Clive, it's got a bit of current exposure, it's a bit exposed to I don't know. I'm really trying to play hard here. What am I learning? And he's put his key on and he's unwrapping a little loaf of bread, and the other couple of crew move up there. And he says, it's very important that you understand this. Well, what is it? He said, on this side of Garden Island, there are cameras. On that side of Garden Island, there are cameras. This is the one blind spot in the harbour. We call it overtime point. if you come past here at 6 hours or more, having done a job, and you don't stop for a cup of tea and a slice of cake, you probably won't get a crew next time, because 8 becomes 16 the moment you tip over. It wasn't the world I came from. I came from my father with a private business, and I thought just efficiency. I had to learn a new language. And I think that when you're talking about leadership, empowerment, you must learn the language of your environment.
Yep.
And their language was, we are the workers, we work hard, and we will take our allowances as we choose. So thank you for letting me relive that, Leigh.
Yeah,
that was really good fun. I was 26 or 27. I knew nothing.
Yeah. Yeah, and as you say, they were tough times, because I think it was John Howard. I can't remember who the Prime Minister was. They were trying to break the Waterfront Union at the time, weren't they? Was it Peter? Who was the minister? I can't remember.
There was Costello involved. There was early Howard. I think there was the fellow from Patrick Corrigan was in there. There's some famous names.
Yeah. And that well, you know what? To a certain extent, in the early 80s, when I did my master's thesis, in those days, Malcolm Fraser was essentially always creating division between workers and management and unions, and of course the industrial relations people had a whole universe. Then when we did the consulting with Telecom Australia, again, the industrial relations people and the unions didn't actually want workers and management talking to each other. They wanted to go through the IR people, because they had a whole power structure there. And as long as there were wars going on, industrial relations wars, that gave them gravity and power. The moment you had people sitting around a table talking in a cooperative way, what the hell? Well, you didn't need the IR people. But so the whole world of management, empowerment, working together, that's very much been the driving force of what I do in organizations, is let's actually work and act in a collaborative manner. So now let's get to crews and you as a leader and creating cultures. Now, I suppose you've got everything from you step onto a ship and the crew are not your crew. So you have to build a team, or there are times when you actually have to recruit and create a crew. So let's talk about each of those situations, about you as a leader. What are some of the rules and principles you work to when you're doing that?
Okay. Oh, that's good. There's so much to unpack. You've given me sort of 3 layers of questions in one, Leigh. So I'm going to have a crack at it.
Sure.
So let's go. Skippering a tug. You say, what's the difference between a skipper, a captain, and a master? There is no difference. So I'd say I was skippering tugs, smaller vessels. And then I started captaining in the early 2000s. And then my crew, just to frame it, yes, it's a yacht. You don't see too many of them in Australia of this size. The crew went from sort of 21 to 65 to 100 on payroll.
Whoa.
So you're leading a team.
Massive team.
All nationalities and big cultural groups. You've got hotel, engineering, and deck. So my translation to business is, someone goes, why do I even listen to a captain? Well, what's the benefit? So there's a couple of things. I'm trying to just frame your question. I'll come straight back to it. We go away together. If it's a very hard day, you don't go home, talk about it with your significant partner, relax, have a weekend to process, come back to it. You sit at the dinner table together, you sit at breakfast together. Your cabin may be a few meters apart. In the case of mid-level crew, you are sharing cabins. So you've got a professional and physical intimacy with your teams. So if you think of a very hard tennis game where you can sit down at the end of each end, have a drink of water, that's business. It's hard, it's grueling, but you can have a pause. I think of maritime as a squash court with an endlessly bouncing ball and a partner that never misses. It just keeps coming back at you. It does not stop. Layer on that is we go 24 hours a day. So you've got people on all different sleep cycles. As a captain, I'm available at 24 hours a day. The bridge or the engine room call me through the night. So leadership, the dial is turned up a little bit. We've got a lot of different nations. We have to think about power distance cultures. Australians have a low power distance culture.
What do you mean by power distance culture?
Thank you. So we have, I'll really dumb it down really fast. Australia will tell will challenge the Prime Minister. Anyone. And anyone in the middle, we will challenge. It's part
It's
of
whole
who we are.
egalitarian. We're all equal around here, mate. Don't get too big for your boots, kind of thing.
Yeah, Scandinavia, very similar. And some of your Eastern Bloc European countries or the Asian countries, rank means everything. So to say to a Philippine crew member who I view as my equal everything, just call me Brendan. Yes, Captain Sir. Okay. The scary thing about that, it's not comical. It is, if I tell them to do anything, they will do it. So that's part of your leadership thing. A lot of people like leadership in sport because there's a very fast feedback loop. Whistle blows, whatever your whistle equivalent is, there's a winner and a loser. It's great. It's measurable. Business cycles sometimes don't. It's really intangible. Did I actually do something well? Maritime is the same, but our whistle might be life. If you get it wrong, it's life-threatening. I literally this morning was working on a bit of a document about a sailing I did earlier this year. I crossed the Pacific. It's 5,000 nautical miles. You are the mayor, you are the fire chief, you are the Surgeon General, if that is needed. You are 3 weeks from incident, from support rather. So that's why I think so I'm going to come back to building teams, which is where we started. I've been doing this a while and I fell into leaders' trap.
The leader's trap.
I recruited people that looked and felt just like me. Yeah, it was comfortable. It was snuggly. They didn't challenge and they got how I spoke. You and I share some great times in the water. I like people that are active. Oh, you ride a bike. I ride a bike. You do. Oh, I like this. So I recruited a bunch of friends. Oh, wasn't that wonderful? It's not. You didn't have enough diversity of view. And I worked very hard, not unlike yourself. I'm quite blessed with a bit of surplus energy, and I really engaged that. But the energy went off all over the place. It just went off in hard work. Quite a few of your listeners work in a structured environment. Let's say a couple that are easy: medicine, law, construction, electrical. There's frameworks that you have to follow. Maritime is exactly the same. So I was working within the International Safety Management Code, which is something that everyone lives by. And think of an ISO, where you have checklists and everything. And I live and breathe this. I knew everything. And then someone said, "What's the role of the captain?" And I went, "Well, the role of the captain." And then I looked at this code. This code is on every ship. As I sit, I'm in my home. I look across the water to Rottnest and I'm seeing maybe half a dozen ships at anchor. Every one of them has the book I'm about to quote something from. Every ship out there, almost 100,000. And master's responsibility and authority. I love this. This book is about this thick. It's smaller than my notepad, yet it keeps all these ships safe. So the authors are incredible. The master must implement the policies of the company, safety and environmental and anything else. Okay, that's a good idea. There's policies, people with a lot of effort. Yep, I should do that. I love this next one. Motivate the crew in observance of that policy. What bloody hell? I thought I was just a ship driver. Oh, geez, I'm legally obliged to motivate the crew. Wow. I must issue appropriate orders and instructions in a clear and simple manner. Oh, the next two, fine. Verify that it's happened, record and adapt. Oversimplified, say what you mean what you say, do what you say, record what you did, check the results. Bang. I just went, oh my word. This captaincy thing just got a whole lot easier.
Clarity.
Clarity. Oh, we didn't rehearse this, Leigh.
No.
3, my golden trinity, my holy trinity. Communicate, clarify, motivate. Communicate, clarify, motivate. Communicate, clarify. Wow. I just found my purpose in captaincy.
Yes.
I had to bring in information through my skills and experience. I had to then communicate that, clarify any mixed messages, and then motivate in the outcomes. And it took nothing. I had written pages and papers about all sorts of things, and then I got it in 3 words. That then began to frame the teams that I looked for. And my
how did that shift? How did that shift, as you say, from hiring friends that looked like you to then how did those 3 words change the way you went about recruiting and putting teams together?
I looked for, there's the challenge culture, which there's 3 theatres where this gets used a lot. Cockpit resource management in planes, bridge resource management on ships, theatre resource management in a surgeon's room. What you want in there is the most junior person empowered to challenge the most senior. To be flippant, the most junior nurse says to the head of surgery, left leg, I think, sir. Yes, left leg, obviously. That didn't happen for a long time, and there's a litany of accidents about that. The greatest aviation disaster ever in Tenerife is down to that one single cause. So I then looked for people that would challenge, and in interview I would challenge. And then one more thing happened. His name is Jordan Wiley. Jordan and I know each other. He is English, former Marine, did a lot of work in the Afghan-Iraq theatre, came back, didn't know where he was. He's done some incredible things for charity and for his own journey. And then someone said, how do you face decisions, Jordan? He says, I use my primary values to shape every decision. Bloody hell. They are my filter, was his exact words. I can learn from this. He's a friend, but you learn. And so I went, okay, I'm going to write down my journal. I'm going to write down my primary values. I wrote this great list, all the great words that we all know. What's the thing about a filter that's too big? Nothing comes out. And I went, okay. And it was either a run, a ride, or something that gave oxygen to my poor starved brain. And I went, wow, I need 3 values. And I'm going to lead by these values. Beliefs will change all the time. You give me new information, maybe the earth is flat. In my experience, it's not. But if information came and proved that, I would change my belief. I will not change my values. So I started to build teams around values.
Beautiful.
We have as with a lot of businesses, there is a filter of training and expertise you have to have. That's great. That gets you to the table. You have to have an engineering ticket, a master's ticket, whatever your qualification. That isn't the reason I want to hire a team and build a team. So we started to look at values, and I played around and I went, okay, what are my values? And I'll share them openly because by sharing them, I'm accountable to you, Leigh.
Yes.
And I'm accountable to anyone. So I started to realize that sharing was important. And my values, kindness, number 1, because it upsets me if someone isn't kind, I observe it. And if I feel myself, maybe I'm on a call center and I'm not as kind because I'm just grumpy having waited 45 minutes, I'm now accountable that I have to be kind to that person. That's my number 1. That's everything to me. The second one is humor. Take your work seriously. You don't have to take yourself seriously. And the third one, which you can use a lot of words here, tenacity, grit, don't give up, stiction, whichever one you want to play in that space. So then I started to ask in my recruitment, what are your values? I didn't ask them as a doorstop. It'd be a time, and I'd give them a bit of my journey without giving my values. It's a shared moment. And then we started to recruit by values.
Wow.
And the team just shifted. We were talking to our good mutual friend from our swimming endeavours yesterday, where you mentioned at a farewell about this kind nature for animals.
Yes.
I built a team of 40 some years back to take a vessel from a North German shipyard into operation. Really high pressure. You've got a 100-meter vessel that goes from a large construction site to operation. And somehow you've got to get across that gap. So we hire this team, everyone's under pressure. We get through and we really began to bind with this amazing team. And everyone's like, I wonder what the secret sauce is. I started to see screensavers. Everyone had a dog as their screensaver. It was comical. We shared some values, and those values manifested in a love for animals. I didn't ask people if they loved animals during the recruitment. No one did. But because we sought values where people were caring and kind to each other, that same value tends to make people care for other things like animals, something beyond themselves. And it was a quirky output. So I think I've got to the question, what changed in the teams? Less of a focus on operational performance, more of a focus on values. Then you've got to underwrite that with an environment that has psychological safety in it. And if you can't curate that environment where everyone is free to be themselves, remember, I'm talking about a hugely image conscious, cookie cutter environment, but we still need to make people feel safe that they can be authentic of themselves.
Yeah.
The moment I discovered that, team building and everything just got a whole lot easier.
Beautiful, mate. Beautiful. Now, a few things are going through my mind. You talk in the book, of course, when you're talking about super yachts, these things are worth hundreds of millions of euro, hundreds of millions of dollars. You talked about billionaires. Now, obviously, you don't necessarily talk about who they are, but you talked also about some of the behaviors you see in those billionaires, of which, as you say, some of them are empowering and helpful, and some of them are not so empowering and helpful. Let's talk just briefly about that. What have you noticed in those billionaires in terms of what makes them tick and what makes them either be successful and at the same time you go, man, I would never behave that way. Just give us a little insight there into that. You said it's the most rarefied air on earth. So
yes, it is. So to frame that, I think a lot of the popular culture about these high net worths, these ultra billionaires, double digit billionaires, whatever you want to say, is curated either through a short interview that's very heavily scripted or someone that spent a week with them. I spent 20 years living through the good, the bad, and the downright ugly. So that's my sample group. Then I came in and I'm a real observer of behaviors. And one of the ones I saw, and there's quite a few, is information. They seek it, they seek the information, and because of that, they get this flywheel going that information seeks them. They are the sun and information is the satellites. So they curate this environment, and as they move, if you're in that spotlight of their information, it feels warm and wonderful, and you give information to them. Their ability to process that is impressive, frighteningly impressive. This is my first big one for all of us. They take no information for granted without taking it down to first principles.
Wow, that's
so
interesting.
You might say, well, Brendan, you understand the sea. You've been at sea since you're a kid and you've done all this training. No, they do not recognize your rank, your position, the clothing that you wear. They recognize the quality of your information.
Wow.
We need to do that more. Whether you're buying a car or going to see the mechanic, I'm trying to think of those things every day. Challenge to first principles, all that information. The most critical one is we may accept, it's a big hospital, and I'm absolutely respectful of all of our medical professionals, many of which are good friends of yours and mine. You must challenge every piece of information. A framed plaque on the wall from graduation does not equal correct information. Challenge that. So challenge all information is a behavior. People such as myself often will say, oh, billionaire ABC, I've got such a short attention span. No, they don't. If your information quality, if the signal that you're sending drops, they will drop you. They have a long attention span for people that give them quality signal.
Interesting. Yeah.
It's phenomenal. I see it over and over. And if I am well researched and I am delivering quality signal, wow, I am getting this. I'm getting the interaction. This is a billionaire that can economically move the fate of the world, and I've got them because I've researched and researched. I don't go in with opinions. I go in with facts that are verifiable, and I have researched it. So challenging information. I always love, and I'm going to go US because it's a very culture we understand quite well. It's the US interview, beautiful teeth, more hair than me. And they'll say, so CEO, billionaire, what's your secret to leadership? I just hire great people and sit back and let them do. No. They micromanage every outcome and make you accountable for every outcome. This is grueling.
Yeah.
For them and for everyone around them. I don't think you can fake that. That has to be deep inside how you're wired. I have sat for an hour over a dining setting for 6 people for Wednesday, reflecting, there's no event, it's just Wednesday. That every little thing.
And the billionaire is actually sitting with you, going through the detail of the dining setting for that Wednesday dinner.
Detail matters. I know in our Australian vernacular, Kerry Packer, the late Kerry Packer, seems loom larger than life. And people that reported to him would say they would sit there with folders upon folders, and he would drill them down to get 10 questions deep on every topic. The moment you faltered, he was out of the deal.
Right.
And he would not so I really believe, and if that's who you are, all power to you. I think it is a great pathway to success. I think it's pretty grueling to live it. So that's one of that's another one, the attention to detail in everything, everything.
You also, in the book, I remember you told me 2 things. One was the Irish diary. We'll come back to the Irish diary, but you talked about the guy that had the yellow legal pad and 2 columns talking about following up and accountability. And I just think this is just a great example of systems, but a critical part of leadership is just that. So can you share that yellow legal pad? Because again, it comes back to one of those conversations that can change your life and future once you learn about these 2 things. So the yellow legal pad and then the Irish diary, share those with us.
This has cost me heavily, the yellow legal pad, because I've shared it with colleagues who then use it back at me. You would go in and remember, and this is all scribble, but you'll see there's a line down the middle of my notepad.
Yes,
Every
yes,
page
beautiful.
has a line.
Yeah.
And you'd go in there, as I said, briefed, ready, and you'd take the time to rule down the middle of the pad. Quite in a very sanguine place, sit. At the top of one column was done, top of the other column was not done. And you would brief on a project, and I've done, is it done? Is it not done? 95% is not done. At the end of that meeting, you would be given back that legal pad.
Now, this is, by the way, the person who did this was, what position were they? You don't have to say who they were if you want to, but what was their position? Who was in their role in your life?
Yeah, they were the owner of a very large project we were building. What were they outside of that project? Founding CEO of a very large multinational maritime empire. Empire is a good word.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So that was, now I'll be talking to my colleague that I work with. Like, is that done or not done? Like, I can't believe I ever shared that done, not done.
Yeah.
It's not done until it's done.
Yeah.
And that's really important in business.
And this became this fellow. Clearly, not the only thing he did that made him successful, but if you're talking about achieving things through the work and effort of other people, this yellow legal pad with the line down the middle, done and not done, because it reminds me of Jack Welch, who, you know, was a superstar manager at General Electric. They made him, Fortune magazine made him manager of the century. And he said, one of my secrets is if someone says it's going to be done by next Monday, I'll be on the phone on the Wednesday going, Bob, are we set for next Monday? Is it going to be done or not done? Essentially done or not done. So he would halfway in the time make sure, essentially go, if you've got any problems, let me know today, because this better be done by the time you said it was going to be done. And so that follow-up accountability component, which of course meant then that the person went, my God, I'm going to make sure it gets done. But you knew that this guy was using the yellow legal pad. And of course, people have since used it to hold you accountable as well.
Yes, and public accountability is, I'm going to circle the right back to where I was talking about values. You said, what happens when you join a team that you didn't put together? I would stand before them and say, these are the values that I say that I live by. I am now accountable to you if I fail in those.
Yeah, brilliant.
That accountability as a leader is everything, because leadership moves.
Yeah.
You know, it moves with situation, and you've got to be agile to that. But we're back on to accountability, and I found that that accountability, and I love a sports metaphor because, again, it's got a feedback loop. And I would say I often do large projects, 3 to 6 months long. So anyone in the room, and this is pre-project, run a marathon. Maybe some have, maybe some haven't. Okay, so here's the thing. If you sprint the last 100 meters, it doesn't change your time. You have to start at the pace you want to finish. That's the only way it works. There is no, so what are we going to do on that first day that feels like the last day? So when you're talking about, and then everyone says, oh, we're going to have a Gantt chart. I said, okay, great. What is the work rate that you think the last day of the project will look like? And that's how you have to start it. And you have to be accountable to all of us. If 3 weeks in, the weather's really nice and we take an early break, that's not how we're going to finish the project. Are we ahead? And how do we know where we are on the project? So that's kind of project driven. But just when you spoke of that, checking back in on people, it's so important.
Yeah.
The Irish Diary was shared to me by a West Australian, and because I haven't spoken to him, I won't use his name. He's probably quite well known to this group. And the reason it's the Irish Diary is because you're actually looking forward, not backwards.
I love it.
Everyone writes what they did, and I love this. Write down 3 columns. What are your objectives? What are your big objectives? Use a couple of headers. Don't put too many in. Just, if you wrote down 20, scrub 15. What are your biggest 5 objectives? Put them down there. What do you need to do, middle column, to achieve those? I'll give a simple one. Objective is to increase personal fitness. What do I need to do? I need to swim 4 times a week. I need to ride 3 times, whatever that is. 3rd column, done, not done. Over a very measurable time frame. For me, I use monthly. I quite like that. It doesn't have to be that. It just works for how my head works. Did I achieve it? The next one might be closer relationships too. And you define these people. How are you going to do that? I'm going to ring them up off spec and just check that they're going well. Did you do that? This is a huge personal accountability tool.
Brilliant, brilliant.
And I love the Irish Diary, and I've found it so powerful for me.
Yeah. They're practical, talk about first principles. They're practical, so simple. We say clarity leads to power, but clarity today for growth tomorrow. Clarifying tools and artifacts that you can use again to literally transform your life. Now let's come back to you personally, in terms of what you do, in terms of your own self-empowerment and your own self-leadership, because we talk about everyday empowerment. So what do you do on a daily basis, a daily, weekly, monthly basis to lead yourself and empower yourself? Not the least of which knowing that you seem to spend half your life in Europe and half your life down here. So it's an interesting life that you have. So you can share a bit about that if you like, but certainly Brendan O'Shaughnessy, as in your own self-leadership and self-empowerment. Tell us about that.
Okay. This is not mine, but I believe it. Mood follows action. Mood follows action.
Yeah.
Okay. So what is action? Action for someone, because you and I meet over, I'm very cautious that physical activity is not for everyone. What is the action that starts you for the day? What is that behavior? Could be reading. It could be journaling. It could be your morning exercise. Identify the action that brings you into a good mood. Have a few for the changing environment. As you know, I'm flying back to Europe next week and I'm going to really miss my swim. But I will replace that with other actions that achieve that same ability to get to that strong mood. So that's what I believe. A habit is just a repeatable process. So you can have a bad habit or a good habit. Don't hold yourself over the fire. You can have a few bad habits, but start the day with a few good ones, because you're going to get tired by the end of the day, and that's when the bad ones slip in. So one of my personal practices is give that foundation, that start to the morning. And whatever mood follows action. What's your action that gives you that mood? Structure. I work on my own schedule mostly. So there's no morning tea, lunch. I build that for myself.
Yeah.
Otherwise I drift. So mood follows action, structure. Communicate, especially if you work in isolation. Keep those times to communicate sacred and get in and talk to people. And
when you say talk to people, which people you talking about? Family, business, community? Who are you talking about?
Okay. Where I don't want to give too much away. You get to a certain stage in life where you realize those people that sometimes you have to give a lot of energy to. And I had a long call with someone this morning that I had to give a lot of energy to. I had it to give. But there's other people that when I get off the phone, I realize, oh, I've received energy. Know where you are and what you need. I was really ready this morning. It's a friend that's just changing in life and business that wanted an hour of my energy. And I was in surplus and I was very happy to share it. And it was good fun. In a week's time, I might be a little bit under surplus. So I will seek and I'll warn it out with that friend to say, I need a bit of your energy.
Well, it's interesting because you're not sharing time and you're sharing energy. That's a whole different perspective on time. And we often say, people don't come to work. Their bodies can come, but their energy may or may not come to work. And again, what you're doing on those yachts is managing 100 people's energy, and you're aligning that energy, as you've said, through the use of values. So let's just talk about self-empowerment itself. What kind of reader are you, and what are you reading at the moment?
Yeah, I read constantly. Or not all readers lead, but all leaders read. Yes. So I will go, this sounds a bit cliched for what I'm doing. I'm reading The First Fleet by Rob Mundell. It's a great Australian book. And my younger daughter is doing her international baccalaureate in Austria. So we read the books together. So it's a great binding moment. The two of us reflect on characters and talk about it. And I just read Whalebone Theatre and The Golden Notebook, classic. So I read for two reasons: to learn or for the beauty of the narrative.
Interesting.
Badly written books, get them out. I don't want to know them. But I'd read 300 pages. I'm looking at about a eucalypt tree if it was written with beauty, or something that I can learn from. I am not, I want to learn not from a academic leader. I want to learn from a leader that has lived.
Wow, beautiful.
In Love and War is a book by Admiral James Stockdale, who was a prisoner of war during the Vietnam era, the Vietnam War. The reason it's called In Love and War, he wrote half and his wife at home wrote half.
Oh, gee. Wow, that's interesting.
And it comes back to when I spoke about the ISM code and the ability to tell it straight. There's a thing called the Stockdale paradox. What's the Stockdale paradox?
What is the Stockdale paradox? Yeah.
What he discovered in this horrible camp, the Hanoi Hilton, was who succeeded, who failed. And the measure of success and failure is the ultimate. Who lived and who didn't. Let's just say it out loud. That's the measure.
Life and death. Yeah.
The optimists. They did not. They denied themselves the reality of their situation. The ones that made it through were the realists that recognized the facts around them, spoke to the facts around them, shared it, and lived. So you might think the happiness industry, the great, we must all have linen pants and do yoga on a cliff edge and be happy is the way. I think James Stockdale was onto something, because if you don't achieve that, you're in a negative balance. If you are a realist to your each day, you are empowered to own that environment. As a leader, I used to sugarcoat the message, trying to create this optimism. Now, you asked about reading, I now tell it as it is. Yeah. We're at sea for the next 35 days. We're in the Pacific. There isn't any internet. We're all going to work long hours. The only people in the room are us. How this plays out is on us. That's the truth of our situation. We're going to have a fabulous time, but I'm not going to tell all sorts of shielding the truth. If you don't like being cheek by jowl with 25 other people for the next 30 days, you are in the wrong room.
Beautiful.
You need to hear that. So when you say, does reading shape? It shapes for me I need to leverage off the experience of others. We can only all live one life, but we can read a lot of other lives.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, first of all, a couple of things. One, I literally have it sitting on my bedroom floor, the book Good to Great from Jim Collins. And in one of those pieces, he talks about the great companies confront the brutal facts. They don't sugarcoat it. They go, these are the facts, and they don't walk around them and try and refilter them to make themselves look good or feel good. So one, that capacity to confront the brutal facts. And literally the other day, we're forming this whole Lifter local business community network. And as part of our values creation, not only is the term real there, but one of the guys said, we have to be critical thinkers. And I kept thinking, the word critical thinking, what do you mean by critical thinking? Because I think a critical thinker is someone who's always criticizing. He goes, no. And he drew a beautiful U curve of, at one end of the U curve, you've got the blind optimist who's just looking at things through rose-colored glasses. And at the other end, you've got the person, no matter what is happening, it's terrible, it's a disaster, versus the critical thinker is going, no, let's look at the actual facts, the actual data, which, by the way, cross-collaborated with something you said in the book around weather, when you said, I want to get the weather from a number of different sources. I want to cross-collaborate or cross-check my data sources. So in many ways, it's the ultimate critical thinker of going, I don't just get facts from one source. I want to get my facts from a number of sources and then cross-check. And I went, because I said to you down the beach the other day, that was a real paradigm shifting, penny dropping moment, because literally a whole range of deals that I'd gone in over the last 10 years, I went in with complete optimistic blind trust glasses, and I did not cross-check my weather sources. The weather was being completely sugar-coated by people with vested interest in the weather's going to be fantastic and you're going to make money and you can trust us and blah, 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 blah. And I was looking at it through maybe I would have died in the bloody the Hanoi Hilton because I was the complete blind optimist.
Yes.
Everything will be okay. No, listen, mate, you're in the Hanoi Hilton and these guys don't love you at all. If anything, they're quite happy to see you die. So wake up to yourself. And so what you're doing, by the way, at the start of those journeys is literally framing the experience of this is the way it is, folks. Forget sugarcoating it. Let's be real and authentic about this, which again is one of our values in Lifter, is let's be real. What does real look like? And let's not sugarcoat bullshit, you know? So if you've got any other stories or examples of just those situations around not sugarcoating or critical thinking or cross-checking weather. Yeah.
This will go, it's in the same space, but it's not a complete overlap. So a few years back, I met my friend in Brisbane, ex-naval officer friend of mine. And he'd come back from a speaker's lunch.
Yep.
And we were walking his dog, and he was a few drinks into a good afternoon by this stage, and he was loquacious in his speech. And he retold a story by Colonel David Hackworth, who's since passed. And David Hackworth was a colonel in Vietnam who sort of went against the Vietnam War, and there's a lot of things going on, but his credentials are just incredible. But his message of that day was tight objectives, loose guidelines. Tight objective, loose guideline. What's a tight objective? Tight objective. And his example was in the military. We can translate this. The tight objective was, gentlemen, that feature here, that hill, we must take it or we lose this entire battle. That is a very clear objective. I know what I need to do and why. What are the guidelines? You are trained better than the enemy. I know you'll lead your people well. What's the other guideline? Stay alive. Meet me there in 48 hours. I think in business, in life, we invert the two. We give a lot of guidelines and we forget the objectives. The military use this as mission intent, and that is how every layer can contribute because we all know our objective. Medical, save lives. That's your objective. That's your ultimate objective.
Yep.
What are the guidelines you need? Of course you need guidelines. I'm not a Pollyanna that you can do everything without a framework. But if you don't understand the objective, then there is no chance. If you try and lead a team on guidelines alone, checklists are guidelines. That gets the job done without an objective. No one will know what's going on.
No, fantastic. Brilliant. I'm literally going down to Albany this Thursday and Friday to work with a group, and I'm working with their manager and their senior manager and in fact the chief exec as well. And this whole area I've been talking to them about, I call it the sandbox model of management, where it's like you set up, what are the goals? What are the broad guidelines? How are we going to give feedback? How are we going to communicate? Exactly. And as a leader, then stay the hell out of their sandbox.
Yes.
You know? So by the way, how does the sandbox model work for you? Obviously on the ships, does that make sense for you? Because you've talked about, so therefore let's get clear on the objectives. And I've got to say that I had to really extract the objectives out of this senior manager, because the people said, we're not sure about the objectives. Now, the moment I asked him about the objectives, they rolled off his tongue, but of course he hadn't communicated those objectives. And once people got, went, oh my God, now that he's given us the objective, of course we can do that. But of course, you've talked about communicating. So just on that, how does the sandbox model work for you on the ship? As you say, you've got hospitality, you've got engineering, you've got deck. Tell us your response to that comment around sandbox.
I'll use the crossing the ocean as an easy metaphor because everyone can get that. We have a very clear objective. We have to cross a 5,000 nautical mile ocean which has many variables. I am in this room and I believe in you to do this with me. You have the right training, everything we have done, the vessel we're on is magnificent. We can achieve this. That's the objective. The guidelines: maintain your relationships, maintain your professional environment, and talk to each other. I don't have to go much more. What I have found, and early in my career, the yachts were smaller, and a captain said to me, I was chief officer, and he said, for the vessel's safety, you need to see every compartment every day. Okay, that's a good idea. That's a really good idea. So you get around the vessel and open this because things linger in vessels. So I thought that's really good. That's really good. The vessels got bigger and it was kind of hard to get around. So I then went, hang on, that's one person going to 70 compartments and I've got 30 crew. Oh, what if I changed my guideline for myself and said, I must engage with a crew member every day. And the compartments will look after themselves because they will now know that they're being recognized. Remember when I opened, I said that what was so empowering to me was I was seen. I will see every crew member every day. Might be a tap on the shoulder and a how you going. And because of that, I will see glacial movements in their behavior. And I might realize that this one person, unshaven today, he's never unshaven. I reckon I might have to ask a couple of questions here. Is that the most minute thing? You'll note the most minute behavior. If you don't see your people every day, you won't get those trends. And it'll come as a great big shock to you. That was amazing. And I've gone off a bit off script here a little bit, Leigh, but I've now, the next thing I learned, and this is so powerful to me, there were 3 levels of listening. And I finally had words. If you don't have words to describe, you can't say it, you can't see it. Listening to compete, listening to solve, or listening to learn. Compete, solve, learn. So what's listening to compete? You tell me a story, I'm going to outdo it. And do you know what? Over a beer at the pub, that's called banter. That's okay. So I'm in the English Channel and you said, there and back or just one way? Listening, so you can move through that pretty quickly, I think, as a mature adult. Some don't. Listening to solve. Okay, we're leaders. People come to us with problems. I will get as many data points out of you as I can, and I'll solve your problem. Well done, me. I'm a leader. Hang on. Sometimes they need that. Where do I find these? Oh, you find them over there. Thank you. Solved. Done. A lot of the time as a leader, they don't want their problem solved. They want their problem listened to. I realized in my leadership, we're talking about building teams and what's changed. I was solving everyone's problems. I didn't even listen to enough to get to the root cause of the problem. And I was quite chuffed with myself that I'd solved the problem. I hadn't even heard the problem. And I was quite challenged by how someone would walk out of the captain's office a little bit, thanks. Listen to learn. What's listening to learn? I want to get 3, 4, 6 questions deep with everyone I want to go where do you live? What country? Okay, how does that look like? Tell me about that. Explain that to me. Detail that to me. We've gone way off the sandbox and everything, but if you said, what are the seminal moments, is when I started to use that listen to learn as my ultimate goal. Next thing you know, all of the team were checking every compartment on board because they were part of the objective.
Yes.
See, we've got back to it. See,
yes.
We did find our way back.
Yes, good, mate.
I didn't have to do it in isolation. And I then had everyone absolutely engaged with the objective.
Yes. Yes, yes. There's a couple of principles there. One, we talk about involvement equals ownership equals commitment. If you want people committed, you must get them involved so that there's a sense of ownership. So,
Absolutely.
so what you're doing there is by meeting with them, because the Japanese have a term they call gemba walk. Go to where the work is done. Don't sit in a boardroom and get the report. Go to where the work is done. And you not only are demonstrating to the workers that, hey, I'm actually interested, but you actually pick up far more data, and not the least of which, as you say, body language of people. Are they shaven? Why are you guys doing it that way? Well, tell me more about that. You pick up so much more information at the Gemba, in the Gemba situation, than you do just someone coming to you with a report in the boardroom. But the other thing there is, I'm recalling, and I literally said this to one of these managers the other day, Google did a study on 10,000 of their managers to go, what is it that makes a good or great or even, very good manager? And the number one skill was the coaching skill, the ability to coach. So when you talk about listening to learn, there's kind of like a listening to empower, because we say the moment you give someone the answer, the solution, what you're doing is training them to keep coming back to you for the solution. Whereas when you coach them, as in you ask them and you go through, we talk about the GROW model, a way of helping them discover the answers for themselves. They only need to come to you 3 or 4 times to realize, you know what, he's going to ask me these questions and I'm going to come up with the answer, and he's going to say, good, great answer, go away and do it. So now I don't need to go and sing because I know exactly the process we're going to go through, unless I'm really stuck. And all of a sudden you reduce, one of these managers, people are always at my door, they're always ringing me. The reason is, mate, because you keep giving them answers.
Yes.
And when they do show initiative and come up with their own answer, you jump down their throat. So you're actually creating a rod for your own back. So they say listening to learn, and there's kind of like somewhere in the middle of there is listening to empower, listening to coach as part of that process as well. I'm sure you must do that in many ways in terms of the Socratic approach of teach them nothing, ask questions so they discover the answers for themselves. What are your thoughts on that?
No, to help in my journey, I'm never without my notebook, and I used to even write in the top of it, explain to me, detail to me. I'd give myself cues because I couldn't, it wasn't natural.
Right.
So back to, we talked about ruling on pages and all sorts. Give yourself some tools to help yourself through. Make them as simple as possible. Make them as portable as possible. And just, I would say, another one I'm saying, pause, listen, reflect.
Nice.
I used to tap it with a pen. They wouldn't know what I was tapping. It was for me. Brendan, you goose, pause, listen, reflect. What I also found, because I was never an aggressive leader, but I would suggest a path. I was their captain. That's an order. It's not a suggestion. I've just completely stripped their agency away. And it was done with the really best intention.
Yes.
Might be something as banal as, what do you think about this navigation track? Oh, I think that's great. I would suggest doing this. I've just ordered him to change it. It's an order. So really, I think for a leader, be very aware that whilst they will cut the words out that you've put in to soften, and they'll take it as a direction. No, I just suggested you do that. I didn't mean for you to do it.
Yeah.
You're the captain. You told me to change the navigation track, so I changed it. Oh, no, I didn't. I really meant that I would let them own it.
Yes.
Okay. Do you like that track? That's a really bad example because a navigation track is pretty much by definition a bit of a binary thing. Do you feel that is a great path? Is that how you're going to do it? I had thought that I was going too close to these islands at night. Okay. What would you think? Would you think of changing that? Would you think I should change it? I'm not going to give you any free passes. You've just taken me onto another place, Leigh. I hope I can go there.
Please do.
Words. Code words.
What word? Code
words.
Code words. Yes, good.
This is lovely. One of the biggest challenges of captaincy is fatigue management. It's brutal how it changes you. Everyone says, well, fatigue over a certain period is like 0.05 with alcohol. Well, it's not, because I'm kind of likable at 0.05. When I'm fatigued, I'm 100% not likable.
Mm-hmm.
And I worked with an incredibly professional human character of a chief officer. And he came on the bridge when he was tired. He was just mopey and moody. And I've got a bit of an audience. And I went, Mildred, how are you going today? And he goes, what? I said, well, it's like we've been married. I was thinking of that English sitcom, George and Mildred. It's like we've been married for 40 years and you're my grumpy partner. Mildred, look how funny I am.
Mm.
And everyone sort of went, ha, 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 ha. A couple of days later, the crew mess, just think of a cafeteria, less cafe, more cafeteria. Whoever was on, the steward, stewardess, would just write the day's menu on a whiteboard. And on this vessel, one of them would put a little cute saying or something up there. It was good. And they drew, you know, your classic captain's hat with a little scrambled egg across it and a little arrow to it and went, caution, Mildred.
Whoa.
And I went, that's fantastic. I'm being called out for my own dumb code word. Mildred then, something vessels do, we held a crew meeting almost at afternoon tea after that lunch. And I said, so at lunch, someone, I knew exactly who it was, someone drew a captain's hat with the word Mildred next to it. And you could see the crew, the tension went up. And I said, that's the best bloody thing I've seen on this vessel for a month. It called me out. I said, you can all use Mildred.
Yeah.
Because saying to someone, hey, Leigh, you're behaving like a real dick because you're tired, is really confronting. But to say, hey, is Mildred on board with you today? It's silly. It's got levity. And you go, oh, yeah, my behavior is. And so somehow having that language that you all understand can help you get across some really uncomfortable ground.
Yep.
It's gone a little bit off script from where we were, but wow, I've had it a few times where we found something that we could all communicate on. And again, I opened with the ability to communicate, clarify, motivate. That was, it very much clarified the situation. The whole crew, oh, stay away from the captain. Okay. I then broke into it. If you cock up as a leader, if your environment allows you, bring your team together, own it.
Yes. No, you're coming back to good to great when they talk about level 5 leadership, the importance of humility. You know, those egotistical leaders who try and pretend they're perfect will never be a great leader. It's that ability to go, you know what? I'm a human just like you. At the same, yeah, sure. I've got a different function, but that ability to be self-deprecating without actually constantly doing it all the time, of course, because with leadership comes the importance of positioning.
You have to know something.
Exactly. But to be the times like what you did, one, vulnerability, self-deprecation, calling bullshit and calling it back on yourself, the credibility factor. And of course, then, as you say, it becomes a word. Now, what you reminded me of was way back in first or second year uni, like I'm talking 1975 in Melbourne University, a guy called Roy Sandstrom was the psychologist, sociologist person there. And he studied team formation. And I'll never forget, one of the studies they did was boys on an outward bound trip when they're going out camping together. And he said the role of humor, that what would happen would be, let's just say a guy was going too slow or he wasn't packing his tent up, and he said there was a role in the group of the team joker, where the joker would give the guy a message through humor. Mate, lift your gun. What, you bloody got lead in your boots? Come on, mate, anybody, you know, and that it would be done through humor. And, you know, in a large number of cases, the person would get it because the within the humor, which is the role of the jester in the medieval court as well, by the way.
Yes,
we used to do a workshop. We used to do a workshop called A Head on Humor down at the university, me and two stand-up comics, on the role of humor in health, the role of humor in teams, the role of, and all of these things. And so the jester and or the joker in a team uses the humor to get the message through, like wake up, shape up, step up, pull your finger out, whatever. and a large number of times the person would get it. What they found was that when the humor would become more and more brutal, and if the person still didn't get it, the team would actually start to crumble because the person didn't clean up or didn't shape up, and they didn't have the mechanism. So the humor and I'm sure you would have seen that on ships, that there would be people within the team who would use humor in one way or another to actually pull people into line. Comment on that?
I'll almost say the world, and we're not going to get political at all here because it's not our platform, but the world is seeing the global effects right now where there is no humor allowed in the court. There is no truth teller.
Yes.
Allowed. And we know where we're speaking there. So the absence of this role is globally dangerous today as we record.
Yeah.
So that ability to go truth to power, use a fable, use the emperor's new clothes. And again, you're asking about the behaviors of billionaires. Quite often, you'll look in their entourage, and the entourage, I'm getting double figures.
Yep.
Two private plane loads. There'll be that truth teller. It might be and there's a few Australians in there because they're the larrikin tennis coach. And they will say, with that respect, hey boss, that didn't come out real well. What? And they'll be that truth teller, or they'll absolutely wrap it in humor, but the message will go through.
Yeah.
There is a North German shipyard, one of the most, it's known to Australia, Learson. They're now working in Henderson. Peter Learson is the namesake. He's like a Prussian cavalry general. He's amazing. He's ramrod. The second in, maybe not second in charge, the head of marketing. Why is this business so amazing? There's another fellow, Michael Breman. He is hilarious to clients. He's disrespectful in a respectful manner. He leaves me in stitches. At the moment, the news about oligarch this and oligarch that, I've watched this man grab an oligarch, wrestle him onto a double bed and say, this will be the best bed you ever have, but you'll miss me in it. I'm just going, oh my God. And I was going, and then the deal is signed.
Yes. Yes.
And I was going, so you're saying the importance of humor. If you are the court jester, it's a very intelligent person who can play that role.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes,
absolutely.
You cannot, a fool can play a fool, only a very intelligent person can choose. So back to your team, when you were studying that lecture, I don't know if they went there, but I would almost say the person with the highest emotional intelligence was probably the jester in the group. Because they feel that room very quickly and they know how to take the air out a little bit and replace it with humor. I think that is such an important message. Yeah.
And the leader, of course, be it king or captain or queen or whoever, are able to realize, okay, when the jester says that, there's truth to it. You know, it's hurting me. As I said, the truth will set you free, but first it might piss you off. They might be pissing you off, but you know that they're actually doing it to help you rather than you float off. Because I think in the book somewhere you talk about at one point ego, you floated off somewhere in terms of ego, and you went, oh my God, I went too far. I think it was when you said something about having fun, and someone said to you, mate, these are multi-million-dollar vessels. You're not here for fun. You're here to get.
Oh, that was a lovely bit of peer coaching.
Yes.
Thank you I can do this. So a very large yacht, and it had an automated system called dynamic positioning, which is used in the Northwest by offshore support vessels. It's a well-known system. And coming into the port of Antibes in south of France, they have to actually even pull some of the large mooring buoys apart to get this vessel in. To give you 126 meters, 10,000 gross tons, bigger than the Navy frigates we see off our coast. I'd been driving it a while. I come from a yacht racing background. I said to my colleague, my dear friend, who I speak of and name in the book, Glenn, I said, Glenn, I'm going to bring in manual. Bit of a swing, bit of a swagger. And he said, okay, do you think that lowers your risk? Frightfully British, our Glenn. I said, well, think of all the tools at your disposal. You have a fan beam laser reference that's built on the dock. You have a state-of-the-art dynamic control system that can move faster than you can. You have had an exceptional amount of training to use this equipment. Will you turn your back on that? Then he kept on going. And when I retell it, it almost sounds like an admonishment. It really was not.
Mm-hmm.
It was candor in feedback, which is so important. It was, he was aiming to assist, one. The next one, it was actionable. So he's given me, I know he's trying to assist, and it was actionable. I could do something. And then he said, if you bring your ego onto the bridge, let's take the word bridge out, office, operating theatre, cockpit, work site, wherever your place is, and you let that make your decisions, you are very close to increasing your risk of accident. I mean, wow. So receiving the feedback, I had two roles. I appreciated his input. I don't have to accept it. Yeah, I have to appreciate that he's gone to the effort to give it. So far, we've had Glenn aiming to assist, gave me something actionable to do. I had to appreciate that. Then I could accept or discard. Yeah, I accepted. And I came in using the full automation at my disposal. And then more than that, when we docked, I brought the whole bridge team and deck team, approximately 20, and I relived that phone call for them.
Wow. So that's humility. That's humility, a teaching point there for them as well.
And it makes me accountable.
Yeah. Brilliant, mate. Brilliant. Look, I'm so conscious of our time. We've been going a long time, Brendan. I really appreciate it. But I do want to say, is there any one question or point that I haven't asked you'd like to cover off on before we wrap up?
We could go on. I would actually love to have an encore someday, decision-making in fast and slow emergencies, because that's a box in itself, but we've got so close to it. But to unwrap that now, the last one, as a leader, I think I fell into the trap, and I think quite a lot do. Two responsibilities is you have to be strong in your leadership, and you have to, back to that, motivate. Others want to be you. If you're my leader and I don't want your job, what's going down? So you have to put your oxygen on first. You have to be strong, whatever that takes for you. And because we're Australian, you have to organise your shed. Sleep, hydrate, exercise, diet. That's your
nice shed. Sleep, hydrate, exercise, diet. Beautiful, mate. Nice.
We're Aussies. So you've got to put your O2 on first. If you are not physically, emotionally, psychologically together, and you're not going to be 100% every day, and that's okay. But you need to have some of that going in your favour. And to get there, you need to have your shed in order. That, to me, I think is so, so important. I thought leadership, I'd looked at this captain as a amorphous being for so long from a distance. I just thought, when I got that, I'm just going to have to work harder and longer, and I'm going to lead by being up more. I just drove everyone into the ground. Myself first. So now, mid-afternoon, I'll go for a run. Not at sea, say we're in port. And I'll look at them and say, it's a great job, this captain stuff. You guys should get it. See ya. You go, hang on. That gives me a lot of energy, and I end up working into the evenings because I'm at sea, you know, I enjoy that. But I'm not flippant, but then I've got it's part of my shed.
Yes.
So if I could close on anything for leaders, is don't ignore yourself. put your O2 on first.
Because we first of all, we say leadership is everything, you know, and leadership shapes the energy. So if you don't have the right energy yourself, then how can you be putting that energy out or sharing it or shaping the energy in the group? Brendan, this has been incredible, folks. I highly recommend Brendan's book, Super Yacht Captain. Brendan, we'll make a date of that. You're going to be back in February, did you say, when you're back? Mate, it's a pleasure talking to you. I'm so glad we captured this. I think we'll be sharing this with the pod squad. I think our swimming group needs to see this, let alone the rest of our members at Everyday Empowerment Institute. Thank you so much for your time, Brendan. And that Irish sailor breathing, may you have the wind in your sails and the sun in your face, and the kindness is certainly there, and safe travels. And as I said, and may God continue to support you, mate. Fantastic. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Leigh.
Thanks, Brendan. All the best. Thanks, mate.